Boston is the birthplace of the American Revolution. It was founded in 1630 and was America's largest city until the 1760s. The city has preserved many of their historic places that we visited during our camping trip to this area. Because our daughter Aspen is considering attending the Berklee College of Music in Boston to study guitar and singer-songwriting, we hooked up our Winnebago mini drop and started our trek to Beantown. Aspen was going to spend a weekend with one of her friends that is enrolled at Berklee, and then attend a week-long guitar camp. My wife Stephanie, our dog Banjo, and I explored the area while Aspen was at camp. This video is about the Boston Cape Cod KOA, where we stayed, and what we did during our camping trip, including a walk through historic downtown Boston and throwing tea into the harbor. If you like our video, please remember to subscribe and check out the links to our photography and music websites in the video description. The Boston KOA is a wooded campground with a pool and lots of outdoor activity space for the family. Although it is only 40 miles south of Boston, with traffic, it often took us over an hour to travel downtown. The campground has a ton of sites for RVs and travel trailers, and they have many cabins to rent and some pretty cool tenting sites too. Although it's right off Route 44, there's a barrier of trees between the campground and the highway, so you can't really hear it. Also, the campground is laid out with the main building, pool, playground, and a large open field in the front area closest to the road. In fact, back in the Highlands area of the park, you don't even hear the road, and towards the front where we were camped, there was hardly any noise. Although there was free Wi-Fi, how well it worked really depended on where your campsite was in relationship to the closest connection point. In fact, I had to do some work while we were staying at the KOA, so I took my laptop to an empty campsite next to a Wi-Fi tower and sat at a picnic table and had great connectivity. However, at our campsite, I had very poor connectivity. Our campsite was in the 100 section. It was pretty narrow, and we were really close to our fellow campers, including the family with several sites next to us who had a loud salsa party one night. In fairness, they shut down the music at quiet time. Frankly, other areas of the campground seemed a bit nicer, but they were all booked up when we registered. This campground really seems to cater to a much higher percentage of seasonal site holders than we usually see when we're traveling. You can tell this from how much they've landscaped and personalized their sites, which look really nice. Most of the staff were nice, but a couple were rude, and most of the campers were not overly friendly. Some campers would just glare at Banjo and I as we were walking around the campground and greeting them with a good morning or a hello. And when I brought out my camera to take some pictures of the campground, making sure to be respectful of people's privacy, a couple of people just freaked out. In my more than 30 years of photography, I've never had this problem anywhere I've camped. One guy verbally assaulted me while I was taking a picture of a bike. A staff member questioned me while I was photographing moss on a rock, and another followed me around on a cart for a while. It makes me wonder what sort of folks they're used to dealing with here. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things we did like about the KOA is that it was close to Plymouth. We went there a couple of times to have something to eat and to take in the sights. We hadn't planned on visiting Plymouth, so we didn't research the area first, but we knew Plymouth was where the Pilgrims settled, and we wanted to see the famous Plymouth Rock. The rock is housed in a granite portico on the bay in Pilgrim Memorial State Park. Created in 1920 to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the Pilgrim landing, the memorial site was created by having material brought in to create a shoreline park around the Plymouth Rock. The area now has some little shops, a replica of the Mayflower, in which 102 passengers and about 30 crew traveled 66 days through treacherous seas to cross from Plymouth, England, to the New World in 1620. That is, of course, in the original Mayflower, not the replica. The Pilgrims were fleeing religious persecution because they had broken off from the Church of England. There are a number of statues and memorials in the park and along the bayshore dedicated to the area's early settlers. When they first sighted land, the Pilgrims' plan was to actually sail further south to New York and to settle by the mouth of the Hudson River. However, as they sailed further south, they encountered very rough seas and they nearly shipwrecked. So instead, they decided to explore the Cape Cod area, and they rounded the tip and dropped anchor in the harbor where Provincetown was later to be settled. After a month and a half of exploring the area, on December 25th, 1620, they finally selected a site and they began construction of Plymouth's first buildings. Plymouth was the first permanent settlement of Europeans in the New England area. There's actually a bit of a debate about the significance of the Plymouth Rock. It wasn't mentioned in any of the settlers' original writings. However, in 1741, a 94-year-old church elder named Thomas Faunce declared that the boulder was the landing place of the Mayflower Pilgrims. The boulder was to be destroyed as part of a new wharf that was going in. Thomas said that his father, who had traveled to Plymouth aboard the ship Anne in 1623 and had lived among many of the original colonists, had told him that the boulder had received the footsteps of their forefathers on their first arrival. Thomas's assertion made a strong impression on the people of Plymouth, so they decided to preserve the boulder. Over the years, Plymouth Rock has been moved several times, accidentally broken in two, cemented back together, inscribed with 1620, and lastly was encapsulated in the present portico by the bay. Whether or not the Pilgrims stepped onto the boulder, it's become a symbol of freedom for our nation. The first winter was very hard on the colonists, and they may not have survived without the help of the Wampanoag tribe and a Native American known as Squanto by the Pilgrims. Squanto had been kidnapped and sold into slavery in Spain. Eventually, he made his way back to America and was sent to the Pilgrims as a sort of ambassador by the Wampanoag chief. He taught the colonists how to farm corn, how to catch fish, set up a fur trading post, and other useful skills. Upon a plentiful fall harvest in 1621, the Pilgrims gathered with about 90 Wampanoag men in a celebration of Thanksgiving to God. This celebration became known as the First Thanksgiving and has been observed as a holiday since 1941 in the United States. We were on our way out of Plymouth when we noticed another historic site on our GPS's Google map, the National Monument to the Forefathers. So we made a quick detour to check it out. The monument is 81 feet tall and thought to be the world's largest solid granite monument. It used to be called the Pilgrim Monument and was completed in 1889 in remembrance of the Pilgrims' labors, sacrifices, and sufferings for the cause of civil and religious liberty. The monument includes numerous statues and carvings that represent the Pilgrims' ideals, many of which have become the values upon which the United States of America was founded. The most prominent feature of the monument is the Statue of Faith that stands atop the base, which includes 4 other seated statues representing morality, law, education, and liberty. Flanking these figures are smaller engravings that represent justice, mercy, education, wisdom, tyranny overthrown, peace, profit, evangelism, and youth. Then on the face of the buttresses are high reliefs in marble representing scenes from Pilgrim history. It's pretty impressive to think that this statue was erected back in 1889 and is still thought to be the largest solid granite statue in the world. What a great tribute to the Pilgrim forefathers. Another day, we took Aspen and her friend to the Boston Tea Party Museum. This museum sits in the middle of Boston Harbor and includes 2 full-scale replicas of the 3 sailing vessels that Patriots boarded and dumped 342 chests of tea into the Boston Harbor. The tour starts with staff dressed in period clothing performing a reenactment of Samuel Adams addressing a town meeting in 1773, where they decide to march down to the wharf and dump the tea into the harbor to protest taxation without representation. Then visitors are taken aboard a ship. where they get a chance to throw tea overboard into the bay themselves before heading into a really nice museum dedicated to the events leading up to the start of the Revolutionary War. This was a great museum that really explained why and how the revolution started. If you've watched a couple of our videos, you'll probably know I like to hike. So after I dropped Aspen off at Berkeley for her guitar camp, I did a history hike while Stephanie watched banjo back at the camper. Boston has a unique park called the Freedom Trail. It's a 2.5 mile long path through Boston that includes 16 historic locations. It's marked by a brick trail that winds from the Boston Common through the city's north end and all the way to Bunker Hill Monument in Charleston, where the militiamen were told, "Don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes." It was fun and moving to follow the footsteps of America's founding fathers on this Freedom Trail that passed historic churches, meeting houses, burying grounds, parks, historic markers, and even Paul Revere's house. Enjoy Aspen's song, The March, as I show you some of the sights along this history trail.
No songs to hear. You are stuck in this deep dark place. No need to get out just to hear me sing. Whoa, oh, 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 whoa,
This trip was different than the camping trips we usually take to America's state and national parks, but we had a great time visiting places we'd only heard about previously in our American history lessons. If you liked our video, please subscribe and check out Aspen's music on our channel. We hope that these videos of our trips will inspire others to get out and explore the world themselves. Keep wandering, friends.